Welcome, everybody, to the Postgame Pint. I'm John Bonus of TwinsDaily.com. With me, Lucas Seehafer. Hi,
How's it
Lucas.
going?
And Matt Trueblood.
Hey.
Before we dive into everything, I want to just touch on a couple things that you'll notice about this webinar. The first is that you'll find a Q&A area for questions. If you've got questions, feel free to put those in there. We want you guys to help drive our discussion. The second is that you'll find a chat area where you can discuss topics or respond to us. We'll start by asking everybody where they're from. So where you're calling in from, if you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat area, we like reading those off. And then if you have a post-game pint, go ahead and dig into it. I don't know, do any of our panelists are drinking a post-game pint here at 3:30 in the afternoon?
Oh, I've actually got one.
Good for you. After that game, you deserve one.
Oh, I figured. that was my thinking.
I think I've got a water around here somewhere. That's my post-game pint. And then finally, if you want to join the discussion, you can raise your hand. There's an option in the webinar to raise your hand. And what happens with that, if I see that, I will unmute you and you can ask a question live to the panelists. I don't think we've had anybody do that on any of the post-game pints I have been a part of. So I'm waiting for the first person brave enough. It doesn't turn on your camera, by the way, so you don't have to look good. But yeah, you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you and you can join the discussion or ask a question. So we'll see if we've got any of our attendees are brave enough today. With that, let's start talking about the game. Twins lose 6-5, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 6-5 to the Pirates today in the last of the 4-game series. They led the game 3-0 early, tied up 3-3. Added a couple of other solo home runs to make it 5-3. Gave up 1 run in the 8th and then 2 runs in the bottom of the 9th to lose the game, to lose the final game versus the Pirates. Lucas, what is it? Well, actually, I'm going to start with Matthew on this one because I know you put a story out on TwinsDaily.com yesterday or the day before about Maeda's. Let's talk a little bit about Maeda's performance, what you thought of it, and what your takeaways were from the game.
Well, there were a lot of positives with Maeda again. I mean, he's becoming really interesting because it's fun to see a different organizational philosophy of pitching take hold with him. When he was with the Dodgers, he really was, I swear, slider fastball to righties, changeup fastball to lefties, and the Dodgers are very much kind of a one fastball organization. You pick the fastball that you throw best and most naturally. They want you to get that right and stay in that lane. Have a couple of really good pitches. The Rich Hill kind of model. Maeda's come to the Twins and he is throwing, I mean, I count maybe 6 or 7 different pitches he's throwing at this point. We saw it really on display today where it was not just a slider. He's got 2 different shapes of the slider now. And what's really more of a true cutter that he was pounding lefties with. And he was doing a lot of those things well, but there was that one big lapse. I mean, Sano boots that ball. You can call it a hit or an error. It doesn't matter. It was pretty clear that Maeda realized the play should have been made.
Right.
And then he made 2 sloppy pitches in a row. And part of this is when he's been reshaping and sort of letting his breaking ball slide along a spectrum so much. He threw back-to-back pitches, 1 to Reynolds, 1 to Polanco. They kind of looked like they were just lazy sliders. Savant casted them as curveballs, and he does have the curve. So it might have been that he and Alex Avila were trying to change pace on those two because they are left-handed batters, get the vertical curveball. But whatever it was, he clearly was not focused on executing those pitches. On the pitch where Polanco homered, Maeda was just staring out at second base a long time before he delivered. Barely had turned his focus by the time he did pitch. And so it was a great outing. And I love that they let him even get a little deeper into the third time through the order, show off the way he's going to be able to do better against batters the third time with a deeper pitch mix. All of that's great, except it was kind of butted by a 3-batter sequence where he just lost focus and got sloppy.
Yeah, and then, I mean, that at the time, I mean, that hurt, but it didn't hurt that much because it was still tied 3-3. And then soon after, Twins added solo home runs by Buxton and Rosario to make it 5-3. And then we saw another lapse in the 8th inning. Rosario ends up, or not, Romo comes in, walks the leadoff batter, then lets him run around the bases for a little bit. Now Dyson does that, but he just made it fairly easy for him to end up scoring a run that, again, it didn't seem like it was all that critical at the time, up until you get to the ninth inning and give up 2 runs. Taylor Rogers facing the middle/bottom of the Pirates lineup ends up facing a number of I thought it was going to be lined up real well with him facing a bunch of left-handers, but he ends up by getting some pinch hits, and a pinch hit ends up from a right-hander ends up beating him. Lucas, what did you see in the game?
Yeah, no, I think it all comes down to, at the end of the day, the Twins had plenty of opportunities to put the Pirates away, and they just failed to do that. And even though the Pirates are arguably the worst team in Major League Baseball this season, they're still professionals. And at the end of the day, if you let a bunch of professionals stick around, at some time you're going to get bit. And I think that just happened to the Twins today.
Yeah, I mean, I felt the same kind of way. I felt like when we started talking about it before the Zoom began here. It was, you can get away with lapses, and this team has gotten away with lapses throughout this series. And you can get away with those lapses against a bad team up until the point where you can't, where enough of the lapses come back to bite you, and it really starts to hurt. One of the things that we've got a couple of different things here in the chat zone and in the question. One of them is, let's see here. It's just weird. I feel like this team was just coasting through the series compared to the Cleveland series. And 2, has the strike zone umpiring been brutal pretty much all season so far? I love this fast start, so it's nitpicking, but still. I actually agree with you that this whole series felt a little bit like they were sleepwalking through a fair amount of it. In some ways, that seemed like appropriate because we've got a number of guys who were struggling offensively throughout the series or throughout the season up to this point, and it looked like we were waiting for them to get back on track. And I think if you're going to choose a couple of positives from today, Sano's home run and Buxton hitting the ball hard, not just on the home run, but also another time where he flew to the wall, had another pretty good at bat. Seems like maybe we got some guys getting on place. But no, you do get the sense, I don't even know what I can point to necessarily in their play, but that they weren't taking this series particularly seriously, and that it didn't feel unusual to me to see lapses like that happen. Am I being too negative, Matt?
I don't think so. I mean, I agree that there were positives to find too, and some at bats that showed that they weren't totally sleepwalking. I mean, we saw them right away in the first inning. I thought it was interesting how much they were trying to make things happen. Kepler hacking at the first pitch. You had 2 different guys in that sequence showing bunt. Jorge Polanco took off and stole second base. They were kind of trying to come out of the gate with a lot of energy, but I think it can be hard to sustain that, when it's been a little while since an off day. The travel schedule's weird, and you're looking ahead and you've got more weird travel coming up. And it can be a little harder to get up for a team like the Pirates, I think. So I think that's all legitimate. And then, I don't know, it just felt like as they fell into the middle innings, they were getting these pitchers who didn't have a lot going for them, but also weren't giving them a lot of openings. They just weren't going to make big mistakes to them. And the Twins maybe got a little, okay, we've got a lead. Let's just put it in the bank and get home.
Oh, and we've seen that over and over and over throughout this season so far. They get the early lead, and then they kind of coast through the middle innings. You don't necessarily see them continue to dominate, and that's been good enough because they've got this bullpen that's been absolutely lights out, but today it wasn't. Lucas, what did you think? You think there's been sort of a lack of intensity so far? Or in this series particularly?
Yeah, I think kind of piggybacking off what you're saying, or what you were saying, is that if you look, the Twins have scored the majority of their runs in the first and second innings this year, and then it just kind of slowly tails off. And I agree with Matt where, the travel schedule is wonky. It's tough to get up for a team that, you're coming down off of a big series win over Cleveland. Then you take the first three against Pittsburgh. Maybe, you can argue, should they have won all three, whatever. But then to just kind of come out today flat. I agree. I thought, Buxton's at-bats looked good, including his pinch hit double last night as well. So hopefully I'm fingers crossed that he's kind of turning the corner a little bit. Sano's home run was an absolute rifle. But it just seems like in key situations, I had written earlier in my recap earlier in the week that Marlon Gonzalez in one of the first games against the Pirates had been crushing the ball. He had like 4 hard hit balls. He only had one hit today, or one hit that day. But today he comes up, I forget if it was runners at first and second or second and third. And there was a fastball right down the middle of the plate and he popped it up. Those are opportunities where if they're presented, you have to take advantage of them. And it just seemed like, and that's not something that's unique to today, that we've seen that, all season. This offense was supposed to be one of the best. We're still top 5 in the majors in runs scored, but it just seems like they've left so many opportunities out there where they could, have gone above and beyond to what they have to this point, and they just haven't been able to put it all together.
Yeah, I don't want to be too hard on, a single loss, because, the other way you could look at it is if they don't give up those runs in the ninth, they end up, Taylor Rogers is the typical Taylor Rogers, well, then you just say it was a workmanlike win, right? They didn't need a lot of spark. They didn't need a lot of intensity. They end up holding on. Bullpen does what it's done all season, and they end up 5-4, and we're heading to Kansas City with a 3 or 4 game lead in the division, only 12 games in. I think there is probably something to be said about the fact that they played so many games in a row. The problem with that is that it ain't going to get easier, right? They've played 10 games in 10 days. They play another 6 more before they get an off day, right? And then after the off day, they play 20 in a row.
Right.
So it is going to be a tough schedule. Now, as a result of that, all of those games in a row, one of the things that we've been watching is how the Twins pitching is healing, or starting pitching rotation is lining up. And we received some good news today. We understand that Jake Odorizzi is at least expected to start the second game of the Royals series. That's good news in particular because they didn't really necessarily have a great option to start the second game of the Royals series if Jake Odorizzi didn't step in there. That would have lined up with Lewis Thorpe's last start. I presume that means we're going to see tomorrow, some bullpen mix that probably includes a lot of Devin Smeltzer in it. Then Jake Odorizzi on Saturday, and then on Sunday we would come back with Jose Barrios again to start the rotation over again. I don't know, Matt, you have any thoughts on Jake Odorizzi's return and what we might expect?
It's hard to know, just because I think every pitcher has shown different things in terms of how they've handled the layoff, how they've handled ramp up, what recovering from an injury in this strange season when, maybe your treatment programs might be a little bit different than they would be in a normal season too. And the Twins have obviously brought Odorizzi along fairly carefully, or at least that's what they're telling us, that he could have been back sooner if he needed to. So you hope he's ready to basically step in and at least get up into the 80 pitches range. That's why I thought it was a little interesting that they didn't push Maeda out to the 7th today. You didn't have to. It didn't feel like you had to, at least at the time. In hindsight, maybe that would have helped in this game, but it also would help tomorrow when you probably are going to be leaning on your bullpen, and might help even into Saturday if Odorizzi's not ready to go deep. So that was another interesting choice.
Yeah. I was just trying to take a look here. How many pitches did Maeda end up throwing today? 80 pitches is all, which is, I think what he's thrown pretty much the last 2 days, or the last 2 games that he started, right? He's been around 80 to 84 pitches, something like that.
And he had that middle to bottom part of the order coming up again in the 7th. I think it would have been an opportunity to continue kind of stretching him out and seeing what he can give you the third time through the order.
I will say this, though. What I liked about that, though, is that they bring in Clippard. And Clippard is facing, a left-hander and 3 switch hitters. I think,
Mhm.
all of whom who bat left-handed, because he's a right-hander, even though he's better against left-handers, right? It was delicious to watch him. The batters kind of choose a more difficult situation or play. Maybe that is their strength as well. Like they're not used to batting left-handed and facing or batting right-handed and facing a right-handed pitcher. But to play to his strengths like that was kind of fun to see. And I wouldn't be shocked if when the Twins saw that lineup, they said, well, whenever that lineup comes around a third time, we're bringing in Clippard for that particular stretch there, because that's just too good of a deal to pass up. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen Maeda go a little bit longer. Now, with Jake Odorizzi on Saturday, one of the concerns that we had with Jake Odorizzi's injury is it was a back injury. Jake Odorizzi has a history of back injuries. 3 years ago, his season was basically tanked by a back injury. And that was the last year he pitched for the Rays, and that's when he came to the Twins after that. That's when he was traded for the Twins. It'll be interesting to see, if we're getting the Jake Odorizzi we saw last year, or if we're getting a Jake Odorizzi closer to what he was in 2017, which was not a particularly good pitcher.
Yeah. And can I interject quickly on
Yeah.
Odorizzi's back injuries?
Yeah.
So if
I'd love to hear that from you, Lucas.
yeah. So I believe that the one he's struggling through right now, I believe I saw that it was a intercostal strain, which is basically the small muscles in between your rib cages. They don't necessarily, generate force or anything like that during the pitching movement, but the injury that he had while he was with the Rays was more of a low back injury.
Okay.
So even if they are, and that's, most frequently I would say where you see back injuries with pitchers is low back injuries. So even though they are technically back injuries, I think they're two different ones, which leads me to believe that the Twins were being genuine when they were saying, hey, we're just going to take this slow, make sure he's right before we get him out there. Because it's not like the intercostal injury is more of it's annoying. It's not anything super crazy, it wouldn't keep you on the DL for like an extended amount of time. Basically, it would cause like perhaps pain with breathing or, difficulty with breathing. And then sometimes on like maximal effort, when you really bear down on the pitch, that's where that discomfort would come in.
Okay, good. Speaking of injuries, I'm not sure we have one, but Luis Ariz was a late scratch in the lineup today, right? He was originally scheduled to be playing second base. Eventually, they ended up moving Gonzalez over to second and bringing Adrianza in third base to bat seventh. First of all, I don't think I've seen anything on any updates on whether or not we have anything to worry about with Ariz. Has anybody else seen anything like that?
Rocco said it was just a day off, and he actually said that they made the change to the lineup last night, but didn't inform whoever on the social team or the PR team sends out the lineups until after it had kind of filtered out this morning. So from all appearances, it's
just a rest
nothing to sweat. Yeah.
Okay, good. Glad to hear it. Let's see what else we've got here. I'll just call this out. We saw a couple of bunts against Kenta Maeda, or bunt attempts against Kenta Maeda. I don't know. Is that anybody know if that's something that we have seen in the past? Is that supposed to be a weakness of his or something? I was surprised Pittsburgh kept doing that, but I suppose Pittsburgh was just trying to do anything they could at any point in time during the series. He certainly seemed to handle them well, or at least that second one, it was brilliant.
Yeah, Dyson and Frazier, who were the guys who laid down the bunts, they happened to be back-to-back just because that's where they bat in the lineup. But they're a couple of guys who use bunts as an offensive tool anyway. Maeda, if I remember right, won a few Gold Gloves while he was in Japan. He's very athletic. That's not a liability that teams are going to go poking at a lot. Just kind of happened to be what the Pirates tried, because at that point, I think Maeda had set down 10 or 11 of them in a row.
Okay. We've got a question in the Zoom webinar chat. Theo just bought a carton of milk and Josh Donaldson was on the side of it. Any idea why? He is on the road trip, supposedly, right? And we've now 4 games into the 10-game road trip, or 4 games into the 9-game road trip, I guess, and we still haven't seen him yet. I guess, when did he get removed from the game? Was it last Friday? So it's been 7 days.
Yeah.
Tomorrow will be 7 days.
Mhm.
I mean, we're getting close to the point where maybe a IL trip might make sense as if you wanted the roster spot. I presume the thought process is they're just being as careful with it as they can possibly be, and we'll see what happens.
Yep.
Lucas, you got any thoughts? You got any thoughts on calf injuries?
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been assuming as well. That it's just basically he shows up to the ballpark, he tests it out, they ask him how's it feeling, that kind of stuff. Now he does have a history of calf injuries in the past. But one of the things that I think I want to clarify in discussing previous injuries is that just because he had a right calf injury in the past doesn't necessarily mean that it's related to the one that he's currently having right now. Basically, rehab, it's a science, but also there's a lot of different varying shades of gray area in the science. One of the things that we know pretty solidly is that the best predictor of future injury is past injury. So because he had a past right calf injury, it'll predict, a future right calf injury, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's caused, if that makes sense. There's a causal relationship there. Because that right calf injury was, I think it was 2 years ago, was it 2018 that he had that and missed a good chunk of the season?
Yeah.
And 2017, yeah.
And 2017. So that tissue is all the way healed at this point from that injury. So that would lead me to believe that any residual calf issues he has going forward is tied to potentially biomechanics, or an emerging field in rehab right now is neurobiomechanics, which is basically taking the influence of the brain and the central nervous system in conjunction with just normal biomechanics. So is there perhaps, in his development while he was growing as a baseball player, whatever, is there a map that formed in his brain causing inefficient movements while he's playing baseball that is leading to calf injuries? I think that would probably be more of an explanation of what's going on with Donaldson currently, more so than like, oh, he had a right calf injury in the past and that's what's causing his right calf injury now.
Interesting. On the subject of being hurt, one of the other pitchers that is out is Rich Hill, and the explanation for it is, shoulder fatigue or shoulder something. Anytime I hear the word shoulder and pitcher, I get a little concerned. And Matt Lenz in the Q&A is asking the same question. Is that how worried should we be about Rich Hill? Any sense on that, guys?
Well, I'll let Lewis do his thing with the nature of, shoulder injuries and stuff. He's better at that. I can speak a little bit to Hill's history, which is he has had shoulder problems in the past. They have tended to be more inflammation and fatigue and soreness, and not necessarily major structural damage. And they're certainly not saying that that's what's happening here. Now, anytime you're talking about a 40-year-old pitcher with a bunch of mileage on his arm, a relatively kinetic delivery like Hill's, there's risk, it's all building up towards something. But I don't think there's any reason to believe that he's got something lurking in there that they just haven't found yet. They're just trying to keep that odometer low and keep him from pitching with the shoulder already barking, because that might make him a little more vulnerable, especially at his age.
And you look at all the, the rash of pitcher injuries that have happened already this year. You have a guy who could potentially be an ace on a playoff, World Series caliber team, who's just coming off a semi-experimental elbow surgery. If he's having any sort of discomfort or tiredness in the shoulder, whether that's because of the, related to the past, the recovery process from the surgery, or just that quick ramp up time, my guess is they're just going to say, hey, let's shut him down, kind of progress this slowly, make sure he's right, so that he's peaking, in his velocity and whatever come playoff time, because that's really what matters. The Twins, I mean, it would be pretty crazy if they didn't make the playoffs this year with the expanded playoffs. So you need Rich Hill for the playoffs. You don't necessarily need him for a random start in, the middle of August.
Yeah, I mean, that makes, listen, I'm with you. They should be as careful as these guys as they can possibly be. And if it takes them an extra month, then it takes them an extra month. One of the questions we got in the Q&A has to do with, the fact that the Twins, we kind of talked about how it felt a little bit like there wasn't a lot of urgency versus the Pirates. They're now heading to Kansas City. There's probably not going to be a lot of urgency against the Royals. After that, they get to face the Brewers, but then it's back to Kansas City. They end up facing Kansas City, I think, 9 times in the next 15 days or something like that. Like, it's going to be it's going to be a soft schedule, not just in the immediate future, but all the way through the end of this 60-game season. Is that a concern for a team that really should be focusing on the playoffs? The fact that they are not facing a lot of high-level competition. When as good as it gets is, the Cardinals or Cleveland, and you've just taken 5 out of 6 versus those teams. 5 out of 6 versus those teams. Are we really? Is this turning into a glorified exhibition season? Will they be ready when the real games start?
I mean, it's going to be hard for every single team. Maybe not hard. Maybe what I want to say is it's a unique challenge for every team to get up for every game this year, because there are no crowds to give you any energy that you wouldn't have normally. Travel's going to be weirder than usual. You're going to be facing teams like the Pirates that you just have no feel for, no real connection to. I mean, and you face them 4 times in 4 days in 2 different cities, which you're not used to at all. That gives it more of a spring training type of vibe. That's going to be a perpetual challenge this year. But at the same time, I wouldn't expect that the Twins are going to stay flat. I think it's just every now and then in a season that is still a grind, even if it's not that long grind, it's more of a sprint grind. There are going to be days when not everybody's feeling it, or it just kind of, you've had this surge that you're kind of on the back end of. And you just have to look to the leaders in the clubhouse, look to the manager and say, how are we going to get back up for the next one and get headed back up the hill of that, arousal, I guess.
And it still is early in the season. It's not a 160-game season. It's only a 60-game season, but it's fairly early on. That brings us to sort of the last thing I was going to show you guys and get your reaction. Today, I got an email with the World Series chances in Vegas and how they have changed over the last 2 weeks since the season began. The Twins' chances have improved considerably. My question for you is, can you guess which team's chances they mostly picked up, like which team's chances have gone down quite a bit? And then one other team has also had their chances improve considerably. Any ideas on who that is? Any guesses out there? And I'll actually also, if you got a guess in the chat, I would love to hear that too. Who do we think chances Vegas has decided has a much less of a chance in going to the World Series than they did before?
Lewis, you want to go first, or?
Yeah, less. I would say, I don't know. Is it the Dodgers? Just because they were so high to begin with, and they're not lighting the world on fire?
Dodgers have gone down a little bit. A number of the favorites have gone down a little bit, but they're not the big one that stumbled.
I was going to guess Houston, just because they don't have Justin Verlander at the moment. They are only like 6-5 or something. The record's not sparkling.
Right.
Still going to make the playoffs, but
yeah. Houston is the big one. Houston is the one that fell down the most, that the Twins ended up going up on. Any guesses on who the other team is whose odds have gone up a lot?
Cubs.
Cubs have gone up. Absolutely, that's been one of them. I will share. I'll share the screen.
Is it the White Sox?
It is the White Sox, Matthew.
Sure. Yep.
So the Yankees have faded just slightly from 4-1 to basically 4.5-1. You guys can see my screen, right? Dodgers from 4-1 to 5-1. But the Astros from 10-1 down to 15-1. Fairly significant. Twins have gone from 16-1 to 10-1. So they basically picked up everything the Astros lost. Right? But the other big mover has been the Chicago White Sox, who've gone from 25-1 to 15-1. Braves have also improved a little bit, but not as much as the White Sox and the Twins. I was also interested in seeing what Cleveland did. Cleveland did improve a little bit, but not much, just kind of incrementally. We did have a guess for the Cubs. They're the other team that had improved quite a bit, 25-1 to 16-1. So expectations are climbing for this Minnesota Twins team is what I take away from that. Not just local expectations, right? This is people with money to spend who want to make money. People in it for profit. Their expectations towards the Twins have won as well. So game as well. Any other points about the game that I've missed that you guys want to cover?
I've got one. This is it's one of those things where if the game hadn't turned exactly the way it did, we wouldn't stop and question it as much. But did you guys wonder why they didn't walk Kevin Newman at all? I mean, the batter who ended up with the walk-off single. I could have asked it on the first batter too. I mean, that he struck out, right? Yeah, I thought about it there, and then I kind of looked ahead and thought they might pinch hit Newman, and so I kind of had that wheel spinning, and I didn't love the Newman matchup per se.
Right.
But to me, it's once you've got one out, and now if you set up the double play, a double play would end the inning and get you out of the jam.
Right.
And batting behind Newman is John Ryan Murphy, who I would have been much less nervous about than Newman. Not that Newman's a superstar, but he's a better hitter than John Ryan Murphy by a good bit.
And he doesn't strike out much.
Right. And if you had gotten a sharply hit ball to one of the – right. And if so if Newman – if you walk Newman there, you not only set up a potential double play, but now you have the force at home if there's a fairly sharply hit ball to one of the corner infielders. There were a lot of reasons why I was thinking, I want to put this guy on and have Rogers, and the other part of it is Taylor Rogers. There's literally no pitcher in baseball who fills up the strike zone more when he needs to. He's not going to walk in the tying run when it's John Ryan Murphy up there. Right. So I would have liked to see that. And that's another thing where maybe the urgency is lagging a little, even from the top step of the dugout. Not that it has to always be at top speed from Rocco, but that was the only other thing I was thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good point. I think that was probably the play. And I didn't think too much about it at the time, in part because I wanted to see what Rogers could do, right? I just wanted to see what he could do in that situation. I was just interested to see what he could do in that situation. It might very well be that the Twins management at this point, I mean, you never want to be the games don't matter that much, but you still want to play to win. But it does feel sometimes like, again, throughout this series, it did feel sort of like, we're going to make the playoffs. Let's figure out what we have. Let's give bump Rich Hill back and start, and let's give Odorizzi all the rest he wants. And Homer Bailey, we're going to give him, he's got a little bicep tendonitis or something. All we keep hearing is like, if these games were really important, we'd be there. And the question is, well,
right.
So you're saying they're not really important, and maybe that is a symptom of what we've seen, and maybe sort of that attitude is a little bit of what we experienced today in Pittsburgh. So. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you to Lucas Seehafer. Thank you to Matt Trueblood. I'd like to thank all the attendees, especially those who were brave enough to put something in the webinar chat or ask a question. Still nobody brave enough to raise their hands to ask a question live. We'll get to that sometime. So thanks everyone for joining the Postgame Pint as a special. And if you missed any of this, you can find a recording of it tomorrow morning on our Twins Daily Facebook page, also on our Twins Daily YouTube page, and also in our game recap. We're also at postgamepint.com. You can always find the previous day's Postgame Pint, and you can also find when to join the next Postgame Pint, which will be tomorrow night after the Kansas City Royals game. I think Nick is scheduled to host that one. So thanks again for coming. Thanks again to Lucas and Matt. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.